Welcome to the conference calling center. Please have...
Thank you for calling. Can I have your passcode, please? Thank you. And can I have your first and last name followed by the spelling, please? Perfect. Thank you so much. And may I have the name of your affiliation, please? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. I'll go ahead and join you here into your conference. You'll be on a listen-only line, and the call is being recorded, okay? You're welcome. You as well.
Me encanta la presentación, la verdad, genial. Gracias a todos por estar acá, gracias. A ver, vamos a lo mejor. Muchas gracias a todos por estar acá. Ayer decían, ¿por qué le sale así la voz? Qué horrible. La verdad, ustedes han visto el progreso, creo que de a poco viene viniendo. No voy a hablar, voy a poner, y hay gente que la verdad que en el chat la otra vez hizo un trabajo fenomenal, han empezado a traducir también, me han ayudado, les agradezco enormemente. Voy a hacerlo, voy a escribir en el chat las cosas que vaya escuchando. Quizás tenga oportunidad de preguntar si es que este tono de voz se escucha y haga alguna pregunta. Si tienen alguna pregunta para hacer, estaría buenísimo que la formulen con la palabra mayúscula en el chat, así lo leo. Me etiquetan también, así también lo leo y lo tenemos en cuenta para poder utilizarla al momento final de las preguntas. Evidentemente la pregunta que van a hacer todos es esa: ¿cuándo lanzan, no? Y si solucionaron el problema, los problemas que tenían. Creo que la otra pregunta válida sería si es válido ese wet rehearsal habiéndolo hecho sin finalizar, ¿no? Si de verdad no necesitarían uno completo y por qué. Pero bueno, Imagino que alguien se lo va a preguntar. Arrancamos, vamos, estamos en directo. No sé si escucharon, lo dejé a propósito, cuando me acredité en la conferencia. Creo que mi voz no salió a propósito también, pero sí la voz de la operadora. Y como siempre, bueno, voy a leer los miembros VIPs. Voy a aprovechar que tengo un poco de voz ahora. Fernando Castañón, desde México, que saludaba. Rodrigo Pérez, Álvaro Martín, Alfredo Bonet. John Wick, tenemos a John Wick. No puedo creerlo. Qué alegría. Fernando Castañón de nuevo. Y bueno, Fran, Go NASA Space Flight, Besos a Gustavo, Chuck La Vilia. Impecable. Y hablan de carrera ahí, no sé, carrera de la Guerra Fría. Carrera el fin de semana, Carrera el fin de semana, Fórmula 1 en Desorbitados con mis comentarios, ¿no? Si alguien quiere sumarse allí, que tenga una idea, vamos arriba también. Me prendo. Cada día se te escucha mejor, vamos, dice Nico. Gracias, Nico, también por estar siempre aquí. Vamos arriba con esto. No lo he empezado. Nelson Izagurralde de Uruguay, muchas gracias también por estar ahí, compatriota. Si alguien está y quiere escucharlo en inglés, el sitio de NASA lo está transmitiendo. Les cuento que tenemos un desfasaje con lo de NASA porque nosotros estamos directo por vía telefónica. Vamos a salir antes que lo que generalmente puedan ver el streaming. Hoy no hay imágenes, va a ser solo teleconferencia, pero creo que va a estar muy bueno por quienes están allí en la teleconferencia. Esta teleconferencia ¿Cuándo? Está Jim Free, ¿no? Jim Free es el administrador asociado del sistema de exploración. Está Clint Laham, que es el vice senior de operaciones. Y está Mike Serafín, que es el administrador de la misión Artemis. Son tres grandes, ¿no? O sea, quienes van a actualizar a la prensa son tres grandes. John Wick dice, prefiero la comunidad latina. Y David Amengol, hola. Como dice, ¿tú qué crees que pasará? Yo creo que no va a haber grandes novedades. Van a decir que vienen en fecha, que van a tratar de lanzar el mes próximo, lo cual es posible, quizás a final. Yo estimo que lanzarían a final del mes próximo, ¿verdad? Así, cabeza a cabeza, ¿con quién? Con la Starship, ¿verdad? Quizás ya está coordinado, quizás ya lo arreglaron entre ellos y quizás dijeron, sí, lancen primero el SLS, después hacemos lo nuestro. No me extrañaría, no me extrañaría, y sinceramente si lo hicieron, me parece una muy buena cosa.
Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are listening on to the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 on your phone to ask a question. I'd like to inform all parties today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I'd now like to turn the conference over to Catherine Hamilton. Thank you. You may begin.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Catherine Hamilton with NASA's Office of Communications. Inside the Vehicle Assembly Building at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, technicians continue to prepare SLS and Orion for Artemis I. The first in a series of increasingly complex missions, Artemis I will be an uncrewed flight test that will provide a foundation for human exploration in deep space and demonstrate our commitment and capability to extend human existence to the moon and eventually to Mars. Here to talk with us about the status of Artemis I are Jim Free, Associate Administrator for the Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate at NASA headquarters in Washington. Cliff Lanham, Senior Vehicle Operations Manager for the Exploration Ground Systems Program at Kennedy. And Mike Serafin, Artemis Mission Manager from NASA headquarters. After a brief opening comments from each of our speakers, we will take the questions. And first, we will go to Jim Free. Jim?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for making the time to be with us today on really a special day, anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing 53 years ago. And it's really great to talk about this test flight to begin our Artemis program to go back to the moon. And you know, this is our first flight, and this is a campaign that we're building. This is a series of missions to achieve objectives that we're laying out as an agency to do near-term and long-term exploration, both on the moon and beyond. So we wanted to kind of give you an update. I know folks are really thinking, hey, when are we going to launch? And we want to have Cliff talk to you about the details of what is between now and launch for us, and Mike Serafin to share the details of based on when we're hoping to launch, what those missions look like, and what we're trying to accomplish. And I'll just jump right to it. I know folks are thinking about the dates, and I want to make sure that you know that these are what we're working to today based on how the work's gone in the VAB, and Cliff will share some details on that with you, and how all the assets come together, including how the weather cooperates with us. So we have placeholders on the range for August 29th, September 2nd, and September 5th. We have a schedule that Cliff and all of our programs have put together that gets us aligned with that date, with what we know today, what we know about the repairs we've done since we came back from wet dress, which we consider successful. The success for us is we got the T-minus 29 seconds. We executed 115 out of 120 commands. We were gimbaling the engines. We got the stage to replenish. You heard a lot of that from our program managers the last time. And then when we got back, we went to replace some of the seals on the quick disconnects on the tail service mast umbilical, and we found that one of the collets that holds the umbilical plate on had some loose fasteners. We had to go in and fix that. Cliff will talk about that in some more detail. That actually gave us a little pause of wondering if we were going to be able to make launch attempts on those 3 dates, and I stress launch attempts. Cliff will share with you what's been done since that repair that gave us some confidence to talk to you today about the dates that we're holding on the range. Those are dates just like other missions hold, so it's not an agency commitment. We'll make the agency commitment at the flight readiness review just a little over a week before launch. But these are the dates that the team is working to and has a plan to. That has a lot of work left of things that we'll have to do and probably learn from, including closeouts. We'll have to make some decisions, and Cliff can talk about the decision to roll out. And as Mike Serafin pointed out to me recently, we've made some decisions already with some of the activations of batteries that have a life before they have to be replaced. So we're here today to say, hey, we think we're on a good path to get to attempts on those dates. Of course, it's the first time we're trying to launch this vehicle, so I heard the deputy administrator today say she used to tell her family when that wanted to come for her launch, she said, plan a 7-day vacation to Florida, and you might see a launch in there too. So we're trying to make sure that everybody understands this is the first time that we're going to try and launch this vehicle. We're going to be careful. We're going to work hard to meet the attempts on those dates that I gave you, and do our best to position ourselves to have the confidence in those dates. So let me turn it over now to to Cliff and let him walk you through our flow between now and then and some of the things that the team down there has worked through recently.
Okay, thank you, Jim, and good morning, everyone. So since arriving at the vehicle assembly building back on July 2nd, our teams have been pressing ahead to prepare the Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft for the Artemis I launch. So that has included repairing the source of the hydrogen leak that the engineers identified during the last wet dress rehearsal. We have replaced those seals on the core stage, and we are in the process of getting postured to do the testing, the retest of those seals to make sure we don't have any leaks there. When we first demated the umbilical plate, we did find a loose fitting on the inside wall of the core stage, and it's called a collet, and it helps attach the umbilical plate to the rocket. And it was decided that we needed to go in there and to the engine section of the core stage and repair that, which included tightening up the bolts to tighten that collet up. So we did that. That work is now complete. And again, the umbilical is attached, and we're just about ready to get into our retest of those interfaces. Aside from the hydrogen leak repair, we have also been working on the final closeouts on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, or the ICPS. That has included some reaction control system valve testing. We've also changed out a navigation and control assembly unit there. That was all planned work when we got back from WDR, but that work is all now completed. We have also activated our batteries, as Jim mentioned, which again puts us on a path toward that late August timeframe for launch. The batteries have been installed into the booster forward assemblies, as well as into the ICPS, and we're expecting to do the core stage batteries next week. Like I mentioned, our teams continue to conduct the final operations before returning to Launch Pad 39B for the Artemis I mission, which also includes getting into the flight termination system operations. Part of this work involves removing the core stage and booster safe and arm devices. We've changing out the command receiver decoder boxes. That's all been planned work for us. And then we're looking to get ourselves ready for the actual testing. We will be doing ordnance ops this weekend on the ICPS, which is separate from the flight termination system testing, but we're converging towards that point here at the early parts of August. And finally, on Orion, we've performed our power testing and have also installed some of the payloads, such as the technology demonstration that will test the digital assistance and video collaboration in deep space. We've also installed one of the mannequins, Commander Munikin Campos, which will fly aboard Orion to test the spacecraft system. So we've done a lot of work since getting back into VAB. We continue to press hard towards getting towards rollout, and soon we'll be getting into our final closeouts of all the different volumes in the spacecraft and get ready for rollout. And with that, I'll pass it over to Mike.
Okay, thank you, Cliff, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for following the Artemis I mission here. I'll briefly recap our objectives for this Artemis I test flight. And one of the things that I do want to emphasize up front here is that the objectives that I'm going to outline here remain the same regardless of which day we launch. So our first and our primary objective is to demonstrate Orion's heat shield.
After the tone, please state your name. Thank you.
When Orion returns from the moon, we'll be traveling about 24,500 miles an hour, or Mach 32, and experience temperatures half as hot as the sun outside the heat shield. So that is much faster and much hotter than we return, or the temperatures that we see when we return from low Earth orbit, or when we return from high Earth orbit on Exploration Flight Test 1. While the heat shield has undergone extensive testing on the ground, and a similar design, not this exact design, but the similar design was demonstrated on Exploration Flight Test 1, no aerodynamic or aerothermal test facility can recreate the conditions that we will see when we return from lunar reentry and lunar return conditions. So validating the heat shield is our primary objective and is a critical activity that we see is necessary before we fly crew on Orion on the very next mission. So our second objective is to demonstrate operations and all of the flight modes of the rocket and the spacecraft, all of the facilities across all the mission phases. So during the flight test, the teams will verify the launch vehicle and the spacecraft systems, such as communications, propulsion, navigation systems. Orion itself will give us further confidence as a human-rated spacecraft that it can tolerate the extreme thermal environment of deep space, and that we can fly in the deep space environment, including passing outbound and then returning through the Van Allen radiation belts. Orion's main engine and the solar array wings will need to work as designed, and the operations teams will need to manage across all the flight phases, whether it's pre-launch, launch, the lunar flyby, and then return back to the Earth, and then recovery. So we've got to demonstrate all of these vehicle systems and the performance and understand the uncertainties across all of the teams and all of the facilities involved across all the mission phases. So our third objective is to retrieve Orion after splashdown. And while engineers will receive data throughout the course of the mission, retrieving the crew module after splashdown will provide information to engineers to inform future flights. Once we return to the Kennedy Space Center after the mission, technicians will conduct detailed inspections of Orion, retrieve data recorded on board during flight that was not necessarily all telemetered to the ground, and we will reuse components such as the high-precision avionics and retrieve information from the payloads that we flew. It will also allow NASA to demonstrate its recovery techniques and procedures in anticipation of future crew flights. Our fourth and final bucket of objectives is what I like to call bonus objectives, but they're additional objectives that are not critical to flying astronauts on subsequent missions, but are important, including engaging the public. A number of our additional objectives in this fourth and final bucket include a demonstration of other capabilities and aspects of the launch vehicle, the spacecraft, the overall integrated systems and recovery plans. Some of the flight test objectives will include certification of Orion's optical navigation system, deploying 10 CubeSat payloads riding in the Orion stage adapter, operating the technology and biological payloads that will be flown inside the crew module on Orion, and collecting imagery throughout and sharing that with the public as far as outreach and just sharing the mission as we experience it all together. So now that I've summarized our primary objectives, I'll tell you a little bit more about the planning dates that Jim outlined earlier. So for the August 29th launch attempt, the launch window open time would be at 8:33 a.m. Eastern for a 2-hour window. That would be for a long class mission. The duration would be 42 days, and the targeted splashdown date would be on October the 10th. The September 2nd date would have a window open at 12:48 p.m. Eastern. Again, a 2-hour launch window. The mission duration is a long class mission, but it's a 39-day duration mission landing on October 11th. And then the attempt on September 5th would have a launch window open at 5:12 p.m. Eastern, and that is a 1.5-hour launch window. Again, a long class mission, 42 days, landing on October 17th. One thing that I will note about our launch attempts in that same time frame is that we do have a cutout or eclipse from August 30th through September 1st. So that's a 3-day period where just due to the sun and earth alignment as Orion is headed outbound on the trajectory, we're unable to produce power just because the spacecraft would be in the shadow of the earth. So we would have that 3-day cutout due to an eclipse constraint. So now that I've covered that, I'll note that our mission planners have started to build timelines, detailed timelines for each of these, and we'll provide another opportunity to talk through those in more detail in the next couple of weeks. I'm sure that many of you have listened to the mission overview that has been posted online, and I'll note that that was based on a short class mission, and we're looking at long class missions here for the attempts that Jim has outlined earlier. But as was stated earlier, the milestones and the objectives remain the same, regardless of which opportunity we have. In order to enter our target orbit about the moon, there are 4 major burns after the translunar injection, which commits us from a Earth orbit to a lunar intercept. The 4 major burns are paired, so there's a pair of maneuvers that allow us to enter the distant retrograde orbit. The first is called the outbound powered flyby, and the second is called the distant retrograde insertion. After we've coasted for the planned duration in the distant retrograde orbit, we have another paired maneuver sequence that puts us on an Earth return trajectory and allows us to depart the distant retrograde orbit. The first is called the distant retrograde departure, and then the second is called the return powered flyby. And you'll hear more details about those as we share more mission planning activities in the next couple of weeks. Those maneuvers that I just highlighted are outlined on the mission maps that are already posted online. The mission availability calendar, just in terms of which days we can launch, are also posted online. And you can see where we have opportunities for either a short class or a long class mission, depending on the day that we fly. I want to reinforce what Jim said earlier about this being a test flight. If you look at the objectives that I outlined a few minutes ago, you can see where our priorities are. We expect our teams to learn throughout the course of the mission, and our primary objectives essentially include that we complete the mission as planned in order to get to reentry, where we will test the heat shield and recover the spacecraft. Our team is prepared to adapt along the way if we encounter challenges outside the mission, and there may be some activities as part of the overall conduct of the mission that we may elect to not complete, including in that 4th bucket of objectives, our bonus objectives, if we have to deviate from the mission as planned. So we may have fewer opportunities to do things like certify the optical navigation system or imagery objectives or payload data takes. But part of my role is to support the team throughout these critical decision points in the course of the mission, including assessment of the situation or circumstances that we may find ourselves in the course of the mission that go beyond established or pre-decided criteria or the flight rules that we've outlined, and we spent extensive time planning ahead of the mission. And then if we need to, we'll work through those situations and decide what the appropriate course of action is. I can say from personal experience as a flight director, and including the Exploration Flight Test 1 mission, which was the maiden flight test of Orion, that the next several weeks will be a flurry of activity as we finalize our mission planning and prepare the rocket and the spacecraft for these launch attempts. Launch day is going to be here before we know it. While we continue to work through each task step by step, today's anniversary is a good reminder of what a privilege it is to be a part of a mission like this. It's not just the Artemis I mission, but it's a bigger picture of returning to the moon and preparing to go to Mars. And we try not to lose sight of that in our day-to-day work. So with that, I just want to thank you, and I'll turn it back to Catherine.
Thank you, Mike. We'll now go to our question and answer session. You can enter *1 on your phone to be entered into the question queue at any time. Your phones are on mute now, and the operator will open your mic when we're ready and close your mic after you ask your question. We please ask that you stick to one question and identify to whom your question is directed. If we have time, we will allow reporters to ask a second question. So the first question will be from Marcia Dunn of Associated Press.
Hi, good morning. I'm wondering, eclipses aside, is it generally every 3 days that you could take a stab at launching Artemis? What's the value of a long class versus a short class mission? And lastly, just one mannequin on board? Thanks.
Cliff, do you want me to take a crack at that one? You can back me up.
Sure. Go ahead, Mike.
Let's see. So I'll start with your last question, Marcia. There are 3 mannequins on board. There's Helga, Zohar, and then Commander Munikin Campos. They are gathering flight test data throughout for us. The value of a short class versus a long class mission, we will get as much mission and as much data as we can out of whatever opportunity presents itself to us. So we can get what we need for the objectives that I've outlined for either class of mission, and that is why we have the priorities in place. We will take the opportunity in front of us where we have a good opportunity to launch safely and successfully. So we don't have a strong preference whether it's a short or a long class mission. What Jim outlined earlier is really that from a schedule and a preparation standpoint of the flight hardware, the schedule just happens to put us in a posture where we think we've got a couple of opportunities for a long class mission in late August, early September, if the work that Cliff outlined occurs as planned. In terms of attempts, we have various constraints, and depending on whether we've loaded the vehicle with cryo or not and how much cryo we've used will determine largely what the next attempt is. But once we've loaded the vehicle, it's a minimum of 48 hours to the next attempt. It could be as much as 72 hours. If we have not loaded the vehicle with cryo, depending on the team's readiness and the reason that we scrubbed or decided to not tank, we could turn around and potentially go as early as the next day, presuming that there wasn't a performance or an eclipse constraint that was staring at us. So it's a fairly complicated answer. It is feasible that if there's not a hard cutout like the eclipse constraints that I outlined, that we could go the next day. If it was, just horrible weather at the Cape and we decided to not even tank, it's possible we could go the very next day. But if we decided to tank and we needed to replenish just hydrogen, then it's 48 hours. If we needed to replenish hydrogen and oxygen, it could be as much as 72 hours. So it's not a singular answer, but there are many variables in place, and depending on how far we got into the countdown, the reason that we decided to not go that day, whether it was range, an issue with the range, or a ground system that we could quickly resolve, depending on whether it was a technical issue with the vehicle that we needed more time to investigate, or depending on whether it was just simply we loaded the vehicle and things stacked against us and we just didn't get off in the planned window. That will determine the next attempt. So I hope I answered your question there. And Cliff, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I don't, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marcia, we do have more information about each of those mannequins on our media resources page for Artemis at nasa.gov/Artemis1. Our next question is from Bill Harwood of CBS News.
Yeah, hey guys, thanks very much. I don't know who this is for, probably for Jim. I mean, would you attempt launch period 25 if you only had 2 launch opportunities? And I'm asking that to make sure, given the cutouts and the SLS recycle options, given the fueling constraints, you've got 3 if the 29th stays in play, but if it doesn't, I'm guessing you would only have 2, and would you press ahead if you only had 2 opportunities? And finally, could someone explain the flight termination system battery and whatever clock starts ticking? I'm curious when that clock starts and how many days it gives you. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. You know, I'm going to let Cliff answer your second question first because it kind of goes to your first question. So, Cliff, you want to talk about the FTS batteries?
Sure. So what we have to do is there's an ordnance connects that'll be finalized, and then we get into the actual testing. So when we do that FTS testing, we have testing to do that's required 15 days prior to launch, and that starts the clock. Right now, we are working with the range to see, and the SLS program to see if we can extend that somewhat, because we do have some challenges right now as we complete that test and all our final closeout work, particularly in the core stage intertank, to get to a point where we're ready to roll out. So we're working that with the range through the launch director and the SLS program. There's also another requirement that says you should have launched by 20 days after you do that test. And again, with our 3 attempts, we do have issues with that timing, and again, that's being worked with the range at this point. And so that's kind of our plan right now. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Hey, Catherine, just to answer his first question, would we go with the 2 opportunities if that's all we had? I think there's a big decision point before we leave the VAB that obviously Cliff has and all the programs weigh into of are we ready to go? What's our feasibility because of that clock? If we're out at the pad already and we had 2 launch opportunities, I would think we have cycles on the vehicle every time we roll out back, so we want to maximize the opportunities that we had, especially with the opportunity to get a longer class mission. So there's steps all along the way, Bill, that I think we'll look at. And Catherine and the team have a really good plan at briefings running up to launch with a lot of the agency leadership, a lot of the other folks that are doing the work. So we'll have opportunities to share that with you as you go. But obviously the first big step is rolling out, and that sets the clock on the FTS battery. So thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Jim. Our next question is from Elizabeth Howell of space.com.
Hello, this is probably following up from Bill's and a couple of other questions, but I really wanted to zero out on the decision process to roll back to the pad. How far does the rocket need to be? Like, what kind of tests does it need to pass? How far do you need to be in terms of making sure it's ready? What kind of things is it supposed to be passing, I suppose, before you can even get it out to the pad to make sure that it's going to be working?
So, do you want me to answer that, Jim?
Yes, please, Cliff.
Yeah. So we have what we call our OMRSs, or our operation maintenance requirements, that define all our test requirements for the entire vehicle. And all of those will be the ones that require us to get into our closeouts in the different volumes will be tested. So we have a strict set of requirements that we'll be looking at and testing to say that the vehicle is ready. Right now, we would close out all the volumes of the vehicle, and what that would include would be basically the Orion, the core stage forward skirt, the engine section, and then all those volumes would be closed before we got into our flight termination system testing. And then once we do our flight termination system testing, and again, all this is defined by requirements that the programs have come together on and approved and said, you must do these things. We would get into our core stage intertank closeouts, which comes after FTS, because that's where all the main work with the flight termination system is occurring. And then we would button up the door on the core stage intertank. At that point, we would be ready to roll.
Thanks, Cliff. Our next question is from Kristen Fisher of CNN.
Hey, guys. Can y'all hear me? Sorry. There we go. Having an issue with my mute button. Sorry. Okay. So given some of the scheduling issues during that first wet dress rehearsal surrounding the Axiom 1 flight, I'm just wondering how NASA intends to handle scheduling surrounding the Crew 5 mission if the first Artemis launch misses this first window. Can you just kind of walk through which mission gets priority? Thanks.
Yeah, let me start,
How
and then
that
I'll let Mike weigh in. You know, we obviously, before Crew 5 slipped, we were working closely with them, trying to help them manage things around cutouts that they have for Soyuz, how they do the crew handovers. So we work closely together at my level with Kathy Leaders. Mike Serafin coordinates with Steve Stitch and commercial crew. So we're going to put the same thing into practice if we end up going towards the end of September. Obviously, we have to, as I mentioned, balance their needs on ISS versus when we're trying to launch and the risks that we have of some of the limited life things that are out there for us. So, Mike, you want to add to that, please?
Jim, you said it well. Probably the only thing I would emphasize is that we keep the communication channels open, regardless of who is on the range in the proximate time frame that we are looking to attempt either a wet dress or launch attempt. So, the range schedule is something that we look at routinely, and then when we see the potential for a convergence of activities, we start understanding that other program or that other customer's drivers and constraints. We share our drivers and constraints with them, and from there, we work together to find a solution that works best for everyone. And if there is a situation where we find ourselves where we both have a need at the same time frame, then it gets elevated to folks like Jim for a decision.
Thank you. Our next question is from Eric Berger of Ars Technica.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for doing this. First, a quick question. I think this would put the rollout on August 18th. If you do target the 29th, just confirm that. And then let's say you do get to the pad, and then due to weather or some minor technical issues you find during countdown, you scrub those 3 opportunities. Do you have to roll back to the VAB to do the flight termination system work, or can that be serviced on the pads? In other words, if you don't make a launch by September 5th, would your next attempt have to move to launch period 27? Thanks.
So this is Cliff. So yes, in terms of the August 18th, that would be our targeted rollout date at this point for a 29th of August attempt. And if we did have to roll back for the flight termination system, because we didn't get off the pad, we would have to go into the inner tank and do some additional testing to reset that clock. There is the possibility with that we could potentially hit the end of 26, launch period 26, but that would be a real challenge for us. I'll be honest with you, but we would certainly give it our best shot at that point. And Mike, I don't know if you might want to add something there.
The only thing I would add, Cliff, is that the FTS work is something that we need to do in the VAB.
Yeah, good point, Mike. We do have to roll back to do that work.
Thank you. Next question will be from Stephen Clark of Spaceflight Now.
Thanks. Eric actually asked my question about the rollout date, but I'll follow up on that. When, before rollout, how soon before actual leaving the VAB do you complete that end-to-end testing? Is it the 17th? Is it the 16th of August? When is that date? Thanks.
So that test will be completed around the 11th, 12th of August if we were to roll out on the 18th.
Thank you. All right, our next question is from David Curley of Discovery Channel.
Thanks very much. Mike Serafin, can you talk a little bit about the heat shield? This is kind of unprecedented. What are you worried about, and how confident are you that it will work? Thank you.
Yeah, David, that's a great question. obviously the heat shield is it's a safety critical piece of hardware, and it is something that absolutely has to work to protect the crew and the spacecraft during the reentry phase. So there are a number of things that we've learned, and this is a new design. It's an ablative material. It's a proprietary material called Avcoat, and it's in a block design. Unlike the Apollo heat shield design, this is built in blocks of ablative material. And there are things that we've talked about from an engineering perspective, and have some amount of test data on, like the possibility for hot spots or erosion in or around the gaps between the blocks. The team has spent considerable time and effort working the appropriate thickness and the appropriate gapping between the blocks. But there is the potential that, because we can't test this fully on the ground, that through the reentry flight test that we could see something that we didn't anticipate. For those reasons, the vehicle is heavily instrumented, and we intend to gather plenty of data about the performance of it, and we'll use that to inform not only our flight readiness for Artemis II, but also some of the margins and uncertainties that we're carrying on this first flight, and potentially buy those down on future flights. The other thing on this mission that is a little unique is that we're doing a skip reentry profile. So we're actually going to dip into the Earth's atmosphere not once but twice, and that skip reentry profile is something that needs to be controlled from a reentry perspective. Our attitude control system needs to maintain the heat shield forward at all times as we perform that skip reentry, and then do it in such a way that we don't overstress the vehicle from a aerodynamic and structural loading standpoint, but also that we don't come in so shallow that we literally don't get aerodynamic capture and skip back out of the Earth's atmosphere and just kind of past the Earth. So there's a precision reentry corridor. There's attitude control that's required to successfully perform the skip reentry, and then there's the aerodynamic heating and aerodynamic structural loading on the vehicle that are all things that we're looking at, and we've got again a heavily instrumented vehicle to monitor all of those things and all the conditions that we're looking at.
Thank you. And we have more information about the skip re-entry on the Media Resources tab on the Artemis I page of NASA.gov as well. Our next question is from Ken Kramer of Space Up Close.
Oh, hi. Thank you for doing this, and good luck with everything. I'd like to follow up on flight termination system questions from several other colleagues. Can you please explain why it's only 20 days from the rollout, and describe the work you need to do in the VAB and how long it takes? And I'd like to know also, I thought the shuttle was out there longer, so how does the flight termination system for Artemis compare to the shuttle? Thanks.
So, Mike, I don't know if you want to take this. I don't have history with the shuttle flight termination system.
Yeah, I would be speculating if I gave an answer to the comparison of the shuttle program, but my sense is we had access at the pad, but we would need to confirm that. We could follow up with you afterward. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, Ken, maybe we can get with you offline on this and get a little deeper expertise for that to help answer that question for you. But from our standpoint, I believe the 20 days, and again, the launch director is the primary interface with the Eastern Range on the FTS system, is batteries and reliability and those types of things. But I think it would probably be best if we took that question offline to the launch director.
Thanks, Ken. We'll follow up with you on that one. Our next question is from Daryl Majima, Door. Hi, Daryl, can you hear us?
Is this for Daniel?
Hi, Daryl, your mic is open. All right. It sounds like we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. Daryl, if you're able to rejoin the queue, just press *1 and we'll come back to you. Actually, that looks like that's all the questions that we have in the queue. Daryl, if you need to, you can follow up with us by email if you have a particular question. So thank you all for joining us today. You can listen to a replay of this teleconference online by visiting the Media Resources tab at nasa.gov/Artemis-1 in about an hour. And to follow along with the updates for Artemis 1, please go to the Artemis blog at blogs.nasa.gov/Artemis. Thanks again, and that will conclude our call.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating.
Bueno, eso fue todo. Vamos a volver a la página. Estamos viendo, mientras hablo, estamos viendo lo que fue la misión Apolo. Esta tarde NASA va a pasar esta misión Apolo remasterizada. Dijeron que iba a ser de muy buena calidad, así que bueno, lo vamos a transmitir. Vamos a justamente hacerlo, pero vamos a ver un poquitito sobre lo que fue esta conferencia de prensa. Marcos, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Ahmed, qué increíble esa pregunta, me encantó, la iba a hacer. Yo no sé si esta última pregunta me la dieron a mí y no me escucharon bien el nombre y dijeron Darrell en vez de Daniel. Yo dije Daniel, mi voz todavía evidentemente no da, o no me escuchan. Recuerden que esta comunicación fue vía telefónica, entonces también puede llegar distorsionada. Lo interesante de esto es que la primera fecha va a ser el 29 de agosto. Van a ser un montón de chequeos. Empieza una fase muy compleja de mucho trabajo para el equipo. Dijeron que tienen días muy duros por delante. Entre 42 y 37 días la misión. Depende de la oportunidad de lanzamiento. Las dos primeras oportunidades van a ser de la misión larga, lo cual nos va a permitir seguir esa misión seguramente todos esos días. Todo el mundo va a hablar, obviamente. Ellos lo dan por un hecho, no solo que lanzan, sino que regresan. ¿Ah? Es la idea, obviamente, certificar esto para que en el próximo vuelo o en los próximos ya puedan ir tripulantes. Quizás a dar una vuelta para la Luna y luego el siguiente sea el aterrizaje, creo que es la número 3. Me parece espectacular que sea así. Ahora muchos preguntaban ¿qué lanza primero? Yo creo que SpaceX dijo hagan ustedes, vamos nosotros después, ¿no? No me cabe duda que es posible. SpaceX sigue con su cronograma. Vimos ahora que rompieron motores, varios motores Raptor 2 en esa explosión, o sea, en ese encendido no deseado que tuvieron en el DC-7. Así que muy posiblemente no tengan disponible todos los motores que necesitan. Me imagino que la gente de la fábrica, el MacGregor, debe estar trabajando no 24, 40 horas por día para poder tener todo en fecha. Pero de la fuente dice, ¿29 de agosto? Sí. Primera fecha tentativa, 29 de agosto. Vamos a programar un streaming. Ya lo vamos a dejar colgado del canal en cuestión de una hora. Así que si vuelven o están acá, obviamente les recomiendo que activen las notificaciones de ese video. Saludos desde Lima, Perú. Me sale ahora, tomé un poquito de agua. Yo creo que Space no va a poner a competir, además no le hace falta, dice Rico. No, están en otra liga. Están totalmente en otra liga distinta, ¿no? Álvaro de la Fuente saluda de Galicia. NASA vive de teleconferencia, dice, más acciones y menos palabras. No, NASA está haciendo algo genial. NASA está aprovechando esto que estamos mostrando, que está Neil Armstrong y Collins al lado del Eagle, hace fecha. Hoy hace fecha de que el Eagle aterrizó en la Luna, entonces está aprovechando la inercia, el momento de esto para comunicarlo. Y Jim Free dijo, Jim Free es uno de los tres que tuvo recién en la conferencia. Jim Free dijo, esta es una fecha para recordar y para darnos realmente como más impulso, más tenacidad en esto, porque obviamente están aprovechando eso, de que los medios de prensa hoy van a hablar de que se hace fecha del Apolo y que justamente la NASA hizo una conferencia de prensa actualizando cuándo van a lanzar y tienen intención de lanzar el 29 de agosto como primera fecha tentativa. Creo que comunicacionalmente es una idea muy buena. Bueno, respecto les cuento, aprovecho un poquito. Voy a ponerme, a ver si... Vamos así y salimos así. Muy cortito. Los quiero actualizar un poco sobre mi salud. No hay novedades aún. La anatomía patológica nuclear de la muestra de mi tejido, o sea, de la tiroides y el tumor. Para quienes no saben, tengo un tumor maligno. Ya me lo sacaron, apenas quedó alguna cosa. Miren cómo está mi cicatriz. Ahora tengo doble sonrisa, ¿no? Está en Estados Unidos. En mi país se hicieron todo lo posible y no lograron identificar qué tipo de sarcoma tengo. Es importantísimo para el tratamiento. Entonces ahora están haciendo un análisis nuclear. Eso lleva días. Todavía no llegaron a un resultado. Tienen sospecha de dos tipos, ¿verdad? Son muy distintos. Los pronósticos son totalmente distintos también, pero no hay estadísticas suficientes porque el caso es muy, muy raro. Entonces no se puede hablar de cuáles son las perspectivas todavía y no creo que podamos saberlo tampoco en gran parte, porque justamente la cantidad de casos que hay de lo que podría llegar a ser, creo que documentados hay 50 al momento. No hablo de mi país. En mi país soy el primero mundialmente. Así que tienen la suerte de estar hablando con una persona, con un tipo raro. No, hablando en serio. Seguimos esperando. Ayer fui a consulta con mi oncólogo, un profesor, y bueno, lamentablemente lo que tuvimos que hacer fue postergarla para la semana próxima, esperando el resultado. En base a eso van a indicar el tratamiento. La parte que apareció ahora estudiando detenidamente la tomografía es que hay algunas cosas pequeñas que han aparecido, que ya estaban. Yo estuve mirando, tengo todo el historial, tengo las tomografías, estoy aprendiendo a interpretar imágenes. Qué loco, ¿no? Estoy estudiando, estoy haciendo un poco de estudio y ya habían aparecido hace unos meses unos pequeños nodulitos chiquitos en el pulmón. Han crecido, es poco. En volumen sí han duplicado el volumen, pero en tamaño no, porque eran muy pequeños y siguen siendo pequeños. No le preocupa eso al médico, porque lo ideal es tener la posibilidad de hacer un tratamiento bionuclear directo por los genes, lo cual sería genial. Entonces eso nos daría la oportunidad de remitir la enfermedad. Es muy pronto todavía para todo esto, pero quería ponerlos un poco al día sobre el tema, ¿no? Nico Ron, soy tu padre, dice, no. Daniel, bueno, volvemos al tema. Saludos de Gran Canaria, nos dice José. Daniel, el cohete Saturno V tenía que despegar 3 toneladas por segundo, no para despegar de la rampa de lanzamiento. Bueno, sí, no lo sé, no estoy al tanto. El Ten cuidado con las puertas, se te hizo pelota una uña, dice Marcos. Una ventana, ¿puedes creer? Mirá, no se ve, ahí está. Hace 2 meses más o menos, abro una ventana así, de aluminio corrediza, y me olvido y se me va para adentro y me muerde la otra parte. Pero fue tanto el dolor que no podía creerlo. Por suerte tenía algo ahí rápido, metí la mano en hielo, agua con hielo, y tal, lo calmé, pero fue brutal. Un error imperdonable. Abrí la ventana así, sin mirarla. Daniel, ¿podría hacer la pregunta en otra conferencia de prensa que yo te puse? Podemos. Va a haber oportunidad. Hacémelo recordar, Ahmed, por favor. Ahmed de Panamá, gracias. Fernando dice, gracias por compartirnos tu vida personal. Mi vida es personal, digo, primero pública. Después son parte de la familia, son parte de mis amigos. No solo los considero, son el apoyo que me han dado para todo. Desde el primer momento, para hacer esto, ha sido increíble. El apoyo que recibo de ustedes, el aliento, digo, las palabras, lo que escriben, sinceramente lo llena a uno y te dan más ganas de seguir. Ganas tengo, voy a seguir teniendo, y no importa cómo termine todo esto. Bueno, todos terminamos igual, ¿no? Pero no importa cómo se desarrolle la enfermedad, yo voy a poner lo máximo, como si tuviéramos después de Max Q el 110%, acelerar al fondo, ¿no? Bueno, no hay más nada ahí en el chat, así que no lo distraigo más. Les quiero dar un abrazo enorme a todos. Gracias, como digo siempre, gracias a los miembros VIPs por participar, por apoyarnos. Gracias a los suscriptores. Gracias por el gran apoyo de siempre. Comentar, por compartir los clips, por compartir los videos estos de que es lo que estamos haciendo, para hacernos aumentar más la audiencia del canal. Nos vemos esta tarde. 20 UTC, Apolo 11, remasterizado por la NASA en directo, lo vamos a transmitir. Un abrazo, gracias. Gracias a todos. Y por favor, teletranspórtanos